So it's 9:30 now. Let's get started. Welcome everyone. This is the session of the co-working group at IETF 121. This is Marco. My co-chairs are Jaime Jimenez and Carsten Bormann. Let's try to make good use of this time for good discussion to progress the documents and discuss any open issues, though we have a packed agenda, I can tell you already. Miteco will collect the blue sheets automatically. I'll keep a look at the chat. We have two note takers for today, Christian and Rickard. Thank you so much. It's collaborative effort. Please help them out. And of course, this is an official IETF meeting, so the not well applies. If you're not familiar with that, please read that carefully. It's about IPR patents and so on. So if you participate in a technical discussion, you have to disclose SAP, any knowledge you have of IPR, or you can just refrain from participating in the discussion. More important, it's about our code of conduct, so please be nice and professional with each other. And a few practicalities, do join Miteco. In general, even if you are on site, you can just to join the on-site tool. For today, for a while, I really suggest you to join the full-fledged web interface of Miteco in the interest of seeing slides at all. But please join Miteco to be tracked as participants. And if you want to join the queue, please join it on Miteco first, and then go to the mic. All right, this is the packed agenda for today, and after this introduction, document status, we have the core cluster, Carsten presenting the status of two of those documents, and an additional presentation related to the Young Library. And Carsten continues with the status of href. Bill will present the conditional attributes document and updates on it, and Martina will cover the bundle of documents related mostly to DNS over co-op. Following up, as also related to that, Christian will cover co-op transport indication, and then we enter in the group communication territory at large, with Jaime covering the pub sub architecture for co-op, ESCO, the group communication for co-op main document, and I'll follow up with proxy for group communication. Then we have Rickard with kudos, the key update for OSCORE, and we conclude with two individual submissions from Carles and Christian again. Does anyone want to bash this agenda or tweak anything? Heard none. Let's continue with the document status. We have published RFC in 9595, so the second of the CoreCon cluster document. Thanks a lot, working group and the authors. I think Carsten is happy with that. 2 out of 4. All right. We have started this habit. Let's see how it develops to interleave also similar updates for documents from other working groups that are related to core to some extent. And we can mention 2 other RFCs in ACE 9594, so sent in the ground for key distribution for group communication. And this is the proto application profile for that. 9581 coming from CBOR, used to be time tag. Approved for publication, we have Coros Core EDOC, so on using the EDOC key agreement protocol specifically with co-op, including a particular optimization that's approved, and with the RFC editor note 48. So publication should be a matter of a few weeks, I hope. And in another working group instead, we have a CBOR document to be RFC 9682. It's also with the RFC editor note 48. And in ISG evaluation, in another working group, I can mention copy AP in the ACE working group. On publication requested in other working groups, there's essentially one of the child document from RFC 9594 that I mentioned before, and that's specifically for distribution of keys for group OSCORE, while in CBOR we have ED and literals, also in AD evaluation that has some major editorial changes recently, but with no technical changes since working group last call. Carsten.
And if you want to learn more, come to the SIBA meeting this evening.
Yes. Renzo, you are in the queue for your information. Welcome. And on post-working group Pascal processing, we have a bunch of documents hanging around here. One of them is the group Pascal document in version 23 has been revised repeatedly to address mostly reviews from the Shepherd, Christian, in multiple rounds. So it's on his end to progress it forward. Should be stable otherwise. And then we have the other two documents for the core cluster. So Comma 19 that was recently updated, and the Yang library that stayed behind waiting for Comma to progress, and they are also in today's agenda in the core cluster. But other documents pretty much in a similar state are group communication for co-op that is also covered today. It addressed the working group Pascal comments a few versions ago, and more recently additional comments that came from Christian. So we have Carsten and Shepard, and it's mostly about wrapping up on the resolution of the comments from the working group last call. Similar for conditional attributes that also had to address comments from working group last call. I think some minor points that are still left open as issues, but should be possible to close anytime soon, so that we can also progress this document. And Jaime is the Shepherd. And then we have href that passed the first working group last call. We had a few more things to do to track this issue that Carsten will summarize later, and we may want to have a second working group last call after that is done. And similar status, but in another working group. In ACE, we have yet another document related to group communication. This is not about key distribution. It's about administration of groups for an administrator entity through an admin interface at the group manager for the sake of creating, configuring, and deleting groups. And I think the shepherding phase is pretty much starting, basically. On other documents in core, a few working group documents have been updated, but are not in the agenda for today. They are on top of the slides. Please read and review those. We have had two recent adoptions. One is CoreClar on correction and clarification for co-op, and we have one slide on that in this status update coming soon that Carsten can cover. And DTLS ALPN, which is a very small and simple document, mostly acting as companion for DNS over co-op that we wanted to proceed in parallel. We have a bunch of updates of individual submissions listed here, and co-op over BP is covered in today's agenda. Please have a look at the other documents, time allowing. And we also have a recent individual submission from Christian that was also already updated to version 1 and is also in the very end of today's agenda. Stateless score. Yeah, and recently updated documents in other working group. A few in ACE related again to OSCOR or OSCOR-based profiles, and one in SHIC on obsoleting the current RFC for compressing co-op headers with SHIC. So that concludes the document updates sequence. I'll do work quickly for CoreClar.
Yeah, this is a document that may be a little bit unusual to IETFers. We prototyped this in the ROC working group some 20 years ago, just having a standing document in the working group that collects corrections and clarifications to the documents we have. So we get some level of working group agreement with the ideas that are in the document. We adopted this last month as a working group document. It had been individual before. And the idea is that we collect issues on the GitHub repository and process these during interims or in other times when we have time to do this. And the most visible discussion recently was about PR number 40, which discusses amplification and zero RTT, and the point here is to record the working group position on that. There are two documents, one in core and one in the thing-to-thing research group that address amplification attacks in more detail. But this particular one is supposed to be the minimal information that you should have when you're implementing CoAP about amplification. So Christian just has suggested an update to this pull request, and it would be good if people reviewed this so we can merge this PR, because that particular text is being referenced in another document. And referencing a PR to a working group document maybe is not what the RFC editor really likes. So let's move forward this. Please send reviews to the mailing list.
Thank you. Yes, a plan for the next interim meetings. This is the planned calendar. We have in mind a one-off meeting in December 18, and then to resume an actual series about 1 month after that for 4 meetings starting from January until, well, slightly before the cutoff for IETF 122. So after this session, we'll send out a mail to confirming the working group for 1 week or so. But absent objections, we plan to book the meetings right after. And CoreClar is supposed to be a recurring topic to work on during those. That said, that concludes this update slot. Any comment, any question, anyone? Okay, then we move on to the CoreConf cluster.
So that's interesting. I will do this from the comfort of the seat here because you can't see the slides otherwise. So CoreConf is a cluster of 4 documents in the core working group, 2 of which have been published, which essentially tell you how to do Yang in CBOR. So the whole thing is about doing Yang-based management. And CoreSID is about management of the namespace that we use in Yang CBOR, which is based on integers and not on strings, so it can be much more efficient. So this is the foundation. And then we have the actual document that tells you how to use Yang CBOR with CoAP, which is called COMAI, and which passed working group last call the last time about a year ago. And finally, there is one addition. There needs to be a Yang module that you can use to find out about capabilities of a server. And that module is probably too complicated for constrained servers. So we are defining our own module. But this work has been stalled for about 4 years now because we have been doing other things. And interestingly, we now have a contribution from Zhu Yang that Zhu Yao, sorry, I'm butchering your name, that may be something you want to look at in this context. So I'll quickly move to her slides. We don't really have time to fully go through these slides, but maybe you can do a quick go through. Okay, we might have projection soon. But good. Yeah. So you can see which slide you actually that works.
Yeah, so this is the about the work we have submitted in the NetConf work group. And no, hello.
Yeah, much better.
Like this.
Yes.
So this is a work about a draft that we have recently become IETF documents in the NetConf work group, and we have proposed a feature called Augmented By, which is about exposing the augmentation list in the IETF YARN library. And other than just simply say, if we already have the deviates, why don't we just add the augmentations? But we identified the reason of using this with a real use case we have met during the implementing the YARN push message parser library. Next slide, please. Oh, I can do it. So the use case that we are most focusing on is the Yang Kafka integration architecture, where when the goal is to sync from the device to the consumers, and in between at the Yang schema registry where they can where it's consumable both from the message collector and to the message consumer, the Yang schema of the entire Yang schema of the subscribe module, which will be not just the module itself but also its dependencies. And when we're implementing this, we're using the standard netconf library libnetconf2, and it has a default action that's say to get all the Yang libraries installed in the netconf client before it can be before using the other functionalities. And after when we try to test the program with the real router, we found that this with this default action, it takes minutes to complete, and therefore it does not meet our real-time requirement, because when we only want to send a GET request, and it takes minutes to establish the connection. And then but however, just to disable this get all modules section does not solve the problem, because the bottleneck is the reverse dependency, which are the augmentation and the deviations, and which is not directly exposed from the YAML model source code itself, but they're utilized in the YAML push message. Therefore, there are two solutions to get this reverse dependency. Either is by using the default action of get all YAML modules, so that the library can library learn about all the entire YAML dependency, or to pass live the YAML push message, because we can know from the message prefix. Next. So these are the two solutions we have identified, but with the second one, we identified that there could be missing dependency by just doing so, because there might be some modules that's used but not exposed in the message, in the first YAML push message we received. So so we think that the best solution would be is to add the also the augmentation list in the IETF YAML library, so that we can pass the module dependency, reverse dependency directly from send a GET request to get the YAML lib content. And for the so with the indentation with the design, the solution will be to pass when we make a YAML push subscriptions, firstly pass the subscription status message to get the subscribe module, and according to the module, send a GET request to the YAML lib to get the reverse dependency list, and then we send GET schema to get each of the YAML modules. And we are proposing this feature here to understand in the core work group whether there's from the implementer's perspective, whether this feature will be useful. Because when we say we want to act this augmented by, it's according to the needs. And some of the gets that we have identified here is because the module is identified by the seeds, the schemas identified to therefore when getting the YAML lib contents, which is a seed in the YAML lib, the client also needs to have the YAML file in order to reverse it to the YAML module that's the YAML file. So which means that it also have to maintain the file in itself already. And the second gaps would be whether the numbers of YAML modules will also be as big as that as it is as in the real routers. That's getting all YAML modules would be an issue for the core conf device as well. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Which working group are you going to present this at this meeting? Is this NetConf? Or?
NetConf.
And they are meeting when?
Friday.
Friday. Okay. So the back row there, Alex, Ivailo, Laurent, those are the people who probably know most about this, and we have to have this discussion.
Yes, so Alexander Panov, I'm not going to waste too much time. So really interesting. I'm going to read your draft, and I would say for IoT devices, one of the things is that because it can be slow, it can take time. Even the number of Yang modules may be not the only constraining factor. Even if you have to retrieve one or two modules, it can take time. So probably, I find it very interesting. So need to read it more. Thank you.
Hi, Michael Richardson. So if I understood the problem that you're describing, you get some Yang, whether it's through RESTconf or in these you CoreConf, and then you need to pull up all sorts of modules because of this, and that's on your management device that you have to do this. So you're not dealing with a constrained device necessarily. And as you point out, if you have some SID, then you don't know exactly how to map it to what Yang module unless you had all the SID files to tell you what the allocations are, right? So you have random SID in yours. So do you want to go out to the internet to ask that question, or do you want like a database locally that helps you?
I'm asking to people here.
Okay. I mean, I can imagine us somehow creating like a reverse map for SIDs somehow that maps to, in reverse DNS like kind of thing. But I don't know if that's really the right answer. But on the other hand, the database of all the SID files might not be, might be 100 megabytes at most, and that might be reasonable your management system just has a copy of it. I don't know. So I think it depends on what you want to do exactly. And I guess you'll present later this week, and I hope to hear more about that.
So I think the question here is whether you will use the augments in the when you use the conf here, because if you don't use the augments and you just use the module itself, then it's fine for you to just have the module and the module SID file. But when if there is need to use, let's say there's not just the augments but also the imports and the includes, then it's the same thing that you will need the SID file, the YAM file and the SID file for it.
In my experiences with Yang, which are not common to network management, augment was a disaster, and we'd rather never use it again. But it was a disaster for reasons specific to the way we're doing things, and I don't think it applies in general. I think in general, people like augment, and it's a good process. I just think it was bad for our situation.
When we say augment is a disaster, I just want to know, because when we propose YAM module as its standards, and when we want to make some modification to it, are we just doing it and we do not tell the author, or do we think that to make an augment module would be a better idea?
Yeah, the problem is that we had multiple things that wish to augment and then wish to combine the different augmented things, and when you do that, you get multiple copies of the thing that was augmented, and that didn't work. You think of it as a trapeze or a square kind of dependency. Two dependencies go out, and then you try to merge them together. That doesn't work, whether you use augment structure or augment, but that's kind of specific to the way we're working, and I don't know that in general that is a common pattern outside of what we're doing in Anima. So I don't know. We can discuss this more Friday. Thank you.
To cut this a little short, Yang is being developed by various working groups which have different perspectives.
Yes.
And we have a very different perspective from, for instance, NetConf, which thinks about large boxes with fans in racks that shuffle around XML and all this stuff. So yes, we have to make our
So I process Yang on my development environment, not in my target machine. So I don't care that much, but I see the problem that you're describing.
Alex, can you make this very brief?
Okay, I'll try to make it super brief. So in the Chic working group, we are using Yang to so it's like a compression for IoT, right? And so we're using Yang a lot with CoreConf for managing these things. and we use augment a lot there. So if you want a use case, there is a use case for that.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me quickly use my -5 minutes to do my part of the slides. I just wanted to point out there is continuation work on Yang CIBOR, but that is happening in the CIBOR working group right now. So there are 2 individual submissions that have received a lot of interest, but need to be moved forward. So that is one area of work. So that is transitioning from core to CIBOR. Then we of course still have to do the whole Yang SID launch, making sure that all IETF modules have SIDs. This is ongoing. I think this week there will be some discussions. You see a few names here. And we have a mailing list. And the third thing is this Komai thing that I talked about, which needs a special Yang library, as I mentioned. So what Zhu Yao said is pertinent here. So the status is we have a -19, just with some IANA fixes. IANA does the early reviews of documents, which is really great. So we can fix them right away. But we still have some discussion open from the T2TRG interim in May, where we looked at further opportunities for simplification. And we have to have this discussion because if we do this right, this can be really simple, which is exactly what we want for constrained work, but we need to find some time to have that discussion, and probably we will have it at one of the next interims. And then probably we'll go into another working group last call. One other question that came up is what about scaling Komai? So if you don't just have a temperature sensor, but a more complicated device, are the access methods we provide in our interaction model good enough to retrieve the subset of information you care about? And so far, the general feeling has been this will be done in a separate draft because, of course, we can't extend Komai. So Komai would essentially be the base functionality, and if we want more support for retrieving subsets of the information, we would put this into a scaling draft. And that would definitely be core because it's about the interaction. Yeah, so I think I already said the plan. So I will now use the remaining 2 minutes of my href time to talk about href. So when we started the core work, we decided that we didn't want to touch URIs as a concept because that's essentially the only thing we could just take in from the other part of the RESTful world without changes. But then in the CoAP document, we actually described how to take apart a URI and translate it into the information model that CoAP uses on URIs. But at the time, we didn't quite understand that we were defining an information model. And this came up more and more. And we now have a document that is called CRIs, Concise Resource Identifiers, that essentially does this work of taking URIs, extracting the information model and representing them in this way. We have ongoing implementation work, so that there are some PRs that are about test vectors that still haven't been fully processed. So our goal was to do this during the summer break. That didn't complete. Yeah, then we had this interesting wildcard here. So you probably have heard about zone identifiers if you do anything with IPv6. And there is an RFC 4007, which is one of the worst RFCs that I know about because it really leaves so many things open. I thought that at the time it was agreed, but it turned out I would be bitten by it later. So we provide a way in the CRI information model to put a zone ID close to an IPv6 address. That was originally based on the definition in RFC 6874, which says how to put zone IDs into URIs. So that's an update to 3986, the definition of URIs. So if you talk about URIs, that definition has changed in 6874. Now the browser vendors have agreed not to implement that, so we are looking for a plan B. And RFC 6874 will just go away. That's at least the idea of 6man. I don't know if we actually get an RFC out of that, but that's the idea. And the question really is how do we handle this? So one way is to say, well, yeah, something is happening there, but we don't know the outcome yet, so let's just do nothing. The other possible reaction is to say this zone identifier stuff is toxic. We don't want anything to do with it. So we rip out any remnant of zone identifiers. But the question really is, are we using zone identifiers in URIs in our deployments? And if that is the case, then maybe option 2 doesn't work. If nobody is using zone identifiers, then we don't have a problem. But I'm hearing from people that they are using them in some way. So my proposal here is to say we just keep the zone identifier in the information model, but don't really say how this relates to URIs. So CRIs still have zone identifiers because we don't have the syntactic problem that the UI has. We can have that in the information model. It's not a problem. So when somebody comes up with a way to send zone IDs with a URI, we can just accommodate that. So this would leave open wound in the information model, but maybe is a better way to handle this than expunging it and then having to put back something later because it turned out that killing 6874 wasn't quite what we were going to do. Okay, so then there is the question, what exactly is a zone identifier? I don't want to go into that here. I just have a slide that you can read in your leisure. So this is ASCII, but maybe not. So the 6man draft that deprecates or that obsoletes 6874 says RFC 4007 says it must be ASCII, and then a couple paragraphs later it says RFC 4007 does not specify the character set, which is interesting. Looking at 4007, I don't find anything about character set. So something is broken here, and we have to find out, and we have to adjust the information model. So that's my summary of href.
Thanks, Carsten. Any very quick comment or question? Christian.
Christian, briefly, we do already accommodate in CRIs things that were there for some time in URIs and are now deprecated. I think kind of keeping it in the model would be a good thing because it follows the same path. If you encounter a URI that does have its own identifier, convert it and do something better next time.
Thank you.
Okay, no other comments apparently. I think we can move to the next one, which is Bill.
Hello. Hi. I'm Bill Silvarajan, and I'm here to present the work that's going on with conditional attributes for core. So brief background, this work basically is built upon the work that's done with core observed at 7641. And it adds some metadata to observe so that clients do not get notifications for every change in state, but only for certain states they are interested in. So where are we in this draft right now? It has already passed a working group last call, and it had an early review from the IoT Directorate, and then we had, thanks to Marco, another review. So we're at version 8 right now. So I'm going to cover version 8 and little bit of the version 8, which was in the editor's draft, so that's in the latest. So version 8 was submitted before the cutoff date for this IETF meeting, and then latest was just a continuation of the work that was done after that. I'm pleased to report that not much has changed between 7 and 8, except for some editorial changes with wordings, and then some clarifications about how certain things are processed. So server processing that is explained in version 7 has been clarified a little bit more in version 8. So the draft is being updated still in this, especially in this week, to address the rest of the review comments. So there was something like 40 issues that have been already closed, and about 5 issues are remaining, and they're quite minor ones. So especially in the latest, the additional clarifications are added towards server processing of conditional attributes, because there are 2 kinds. One is a notification and one is control. And certain control attributes can actually influence the way notifications are done, even if the conditional attributes are not specifically designed so that the state has changed yet. Okay, so and then there was early review from the IoT Directorate for version 6, and we had a short meeting a couple of weeks ago, and everything has been resolved except for one that I'll be coming to a little bit later. So this is essentially connected to the IANA considerations. I also received feedback from IANA to clarify registration procedure, so that's the remaining thing left. And yeah, so just 2 things left. Firstly, as I mentioned, the sections on IANA considerations. Essentially, there's that also was from the review of the IoT Directorate and also from Marco. So clarifying the registration procedures and understanding what the policies should be for sorts of the conditional attributes registry that we are proposing. And then there were a couple of editorial changes left that I didn't really have time to fix. So these are simple, just to change some sequence diagrams to a different format, or then repositioning some sections in the draft. And that's basically it.
Thank you, Bill. Any comment or question? Okay, thinking of the timeline, there are 5 issues, I think, open on the GitHub, all marked as editorial fixes to be done. Do we manage here to have a version 9 addressing those in the next 20 days or so, and then do the shepherding and ship this by the end of the year, basically?
Yeah, I think this week might be, I will be addressing some issues this week, and particularly for some diagrams and so on. It might not be that easy to fix it on a laptop, so I'll need a slightly bigger screen to do that. But essentially within 20 days is reasonable.
Okay. Would it work for you, Jaime, for the shepherding right after? Yeah, really to ship this by the end of the year. Okay.
Great.
Sounds
Thanks.
great.
Yep.
Thanks. Also for saving time. Okay, so the next is Martina. There's a comment from Matthew Gilmore also in the chat. Thanks for your hard work on the conditional attributes draft. At OMA, we'd like to thank Twang. We find this work very useful. Thank you, Matthew.
Hello. I'm talking about DNS over CoAP, and with that also service binding records with CoAP. This resulted at the moment in 3 drafts. You can see them there. And the updates since Vancouver are basically that we, for the DNS over CoAP draft itself, addressed some addressed some review by Thomas Versati, which got into the security considerations. and updated for long-lived security contexts and CIDs. That's the pull request 40 that Carsten mentioned before. Then we also provided a draft that defines an ALPN for co-op over DTLS, which got adopted by the core working group since last time. And there is also this draft on which is a problem statement for service B records with OSCORE, where we didn't do an update since the last IETF, but yeah, it exists, and I will come to that later. So this is how the situation for this whole DNS over co-op bundle looks like now. You see there is a lot of cross-referencing, but if you just look at the normative references, basically we are only referencing RCs or these two RCs, which I call the minimal doc service parameter bundle. So yeah, I think we can progress on this. Yeah, so there's still work needed for the OSCORE ad hoc and service B problem statement, and there we need some help from experts because yeah, I think all that we could do is already done. So please, if you can give some input, it will be very appreciated. And yeah, for the other two drafts, DNS over co-op and co-op DTLS ALPN, we are basically done with our work, except for the pull request 40, which hopefully will be done by the end of the week. So yeah, after that, might it be ready for working group plus core?
Thanks. And yeah, also as far as I can remember, that reference is the only thing that we should fix before a proper working group was called. But yeah, it should happen anytime soon, really. And we plan to keep in the loop DNS open deprive.
Yeah,
also,
of course.
And we also requested for the second time an early review from the DNS DIR, but I don't think we got the review.
I don't think so. No, I did. At least I didn't get anything back.
Okay, I'll see who we can nudge.
Yeah.
But it will come eventually.
Are there any questions? Okay, then I save some time.
Thanks also about that. Christian is next with transport indication.
Hello, I am here again to talk about transport indication. Is it? Sorry, yeah. Better now. Okay. To talk about yeah, no, that sounds better. To talk about transport indication, which is the document in which we describe how different co-op transports can be discovered and used automatically. So if you're on co-op over UDP, but there are good reasons to switch over to TCP. How do you even know? How can you access the resources without just guessing that because it's the same IP address, it will also work? At the same time, that document also addresses the long-standing issue that has been blocking us from actually working on new standardized transports. That is that we have this construction of co-op plus something something in the scheme that is informing the recipient of the URI on how to actually establish the connection. That is also described here on what's the path forward here, generally saying that it is left to the resolution mechanism, and that would enable us to do proper work on more transports. And there is work going on. So, for example, people in RouterOS have been pondering how they can use co-op over the CAN bus. There's a document that I hope the working group will take up on co-op over GATT, which there are now also independent implementations that are work in progress on, and people are using co-op regularly over MQTT as well. So the ones that we have will not be the last ones that are ever specified. So what happened since last time we talked? I've restructured based on input from the working group the document a bit to be more accessible. The restructuring keeps the core idea that proxies, that the way we are dealing with different proxy transports is that we are treating them basically as proxies towards the original service, even though that proxy does not take the request and put it on the network again, but to take the request, but basically loop it back to the same service, and in fact can just transparently process it. But from a formal point of view, things are still described as proxies. The document has long had links in there as a means of discovering this proxy, and that has not changed. But it is not the only way, because the work on DNS has shown that service binding records are now a thing that is well usable and established in the DNS world. So had we had SVCB back in the day when COAP over TCP was done, we would probably have gone with this. And this is now more clearly indicated that not only this would have been a way, but this is something that we can use in future developments, and a few registrations for that are also added in here, so that an application can start using service binding records for COAP. Right now, this is proposing that we have a single underscore COAP service for that. Previously, I was suggesting COAP as and COAP as distinct things. This is something that I need feedback on, basically from people who look through the whole thing and decide whether that works for their use cases. I think I lost the focus.
Yeah, my
Okay.
just crashed, sorry.
Okay. So, yep, that would be a good time to take a question then, Tim.
Tim, go ahead.
Hello, Tim. We don't hear you. Okay, then I'll just make an educated guess on what would be on the next slide. Or Marco, can you? Okay. I just have to. Okay. So an open question. I'll go to open questions. We should be up next. That is, right now I'm. Yeah, thanks. Right now, I'm describing that there is a underscore COAP SVCB record. We could just as well describe a new resource record for COAP, which is what HTTP has done with their HTTPS record, and SVCP, the RFC 9640 does describe that this can be done, and this is an option. I just don't know which of those options we should take. So whether it's be underscore COAP.device.example.com in SVCP, or dev.example.com in COAP. I have no strong preference. I'd rely on input from you folks for that. And similarly, inside those SVCP records, should we have a new parameter for the non-TLS transport? Should we just put them into the ALPN TLS parameter? No strong preference. There are a few parts in the document that I think are keeping the document from moving forward towards completion. In particular, we have those SVCP parameters, ad hoc cred and info, which are essentially doing things that Martin has already mentioned about tying this all to OSCORE. I think we might be better served by moving those out. There is a whole appendix right now on how we could place that information that is discoverable, for example, through SVCP and also maybe TLSA records into an IP literal, because that is really the like one open point when we come to the story for new COAP transports around IP literals. So if, say, someone were to specify COAP over quick and follow this document's guidance, what would happen is they would describe the URI as coap://device.example.com. And the client would send a SVCP query for that and get the result, but you can't express the same information that you can express with SVCP and TLSA results in an IP literal. So there is a concrete proposal of how to have an IPv4 literal that packs all that information in. But that is probably not happening on the same pace as the rest of the document. So I'd suggest to move it out, but I'd really appreciate all your feedback, especially also as to where this would move. mean, might even be something to move out of this working group because, as we learned in all dispatch, the topic of addressing devices outside the PKI securely is something that is more general than what is happening in core. But this is a proposal that we are having here, so guidance guidance requested. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's just the example of those literals. I won't go through details. That's what it looks like now. It doesn't look like that precisely because it's a work in progress syntax, but it might give you a bit of the idea about that. And I won't spend too much more time on this. Okay, but maybe we could go back to the open questions because that's really my last slide otherwise. Yeah, that's how I plan to move forward. What are your thoughts on that?
Any thoughts? Just give it a try. We'll see what happens once text is nailed down.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've been doing for some time with this document, so I'd really appreciate let's go.
So it takes some time to find the web tab and the button for the hand tool, but okay. Yeah, I was just wondering, there's lots of questions being asked here, and to be frank, I don't understand any of them. So I just want to say that I'm not sure if there are much people here who do actually understand this. I also haven't read the draft, sorry.
Would it make sense then to have an interim where we spend a bit more time going into kind of hashing this through, maybe in December?
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. So it seems like a very important topic in the sense, supporting an arbitrary number of transports, including future ones.
Done.
Yeah.
Mark December 18 in your calendars.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. And we are 8 minutes early. I don't know how we managed to, so no stress.
Right. So the co-op PubSub draft. Next slide. As we have presented this draft a few times already in the IETF, and it's one of these long-standing documents that we have. Overall picture is a definition for a co-op PubSub broker that acts as a co-op server. You can subscribe to resources. You can publish on resources. It has a configuration aspect as well. So ideally, you have an administrator that creates a topic configuration and that sets up the right topic data path and basically kicks off all the PubSub type of interaction. Just very high level. I'm not going to go into details with this. Next slide. Oh, sorry. I forgot to grab that. Oh, there. So internally, it basically has the topic collection resource, one or more, under which you have topic configurations, which are the ones used by the manager to set it up. You have the usual operations on each of them with the usual co-op methods. And then each topic configuration resource has the topic properties. I don't think I have on the slides how they look like. Sorry for that, I forgot. But basically, the topic properties would define the topic configuration. You have things like the rate limiting factors. You have things like the topic data resource, as I mentioned before, where you can subscribe to. You have whether you want to have it initialized so that subscribers can automatically subscribe even if the topic is not created. And we don't have the slides. Luckily, I have them here on my phone. Sorry, what did I do? Did I do? All right. So no worries. I have given this presentation many, many times, so I know it by heart. So the new thing, which I have here also. Shall I continue, or do you want me to wait? Or
we have time on our side.
All right.
Now as a luxury.
Hey, but it's not a problem. Basically, the next slides, which I will just say viva voce, are about the updates from the version 13 to 14, which was not presented to to the group, but it happened. And 14 to 15, which is the main one that I'm presenting now. So from the main thing from 13 to 14 was some restructuring of the sections for readability. There was some topic control. So if for those who were here, you do see them. So they see them in ITEC, because if you want to go to this slide, 13 to 14. All right. Thank you, Alex. So if you remember the discussion we had in Brisbane, basically, some of you raised some topic, some issue with the parameters in the topic configuration. Then we had a discussion with David, and based on that discussion, I updated the document accordingly. Then I added a section on iPatch, which was also another request at the time. And basically a few more examples for various interactions that were missing. Actually, the document is full of examples, so I think that probably is not a complaint. Right, and then some other editorial changes, because we got some reviews from some colleagues. Now, on 14 to 15, as you may know, there is an implementation available on GitHub, built on top of IO Co-op. And there was a bug at the time. Luckily, fixing it was very easy, because it was about removing code and not adding anything. So there was a problem with the notification on the subscribers in some scenarios. So basically, that is fixed as well. By the way, I mean, in the next slide, like in case. All right. So it's no one before, please. Yeah, 14 to 15 is a bit weird. Thank you, Francesca. So, yeah, so basically, again, based on feedback, some people were requesting to have an automatic way so that the broker pre-populates the topic data path, so that the subscribers can subscribe even if there is no publication at the time. So that was added as well as an option. Again, this was based on the request from David. And then another request was to specify topic history. I mean, the manager can create new topics. There is no limit a priori of the topics he can create, but basically the request was to have a specific parameter already defined in the RFC, in the draft, sorry, in case somebody has questions. So we added that. And next slide, please. No, previous, sorry. Previous. There. Yeah. So another update is all of the examples. I mean, there's no specific way to define to write these examples at the moment. So I took RFC 9594, key update for GroupCom, right? I forgot now the name of the draft. Yeah, thank you. So basically, it looks pretty nice for the reader. I mean, this is more like an editorial thing, but as a reader, often you like to see the request responses properly presented, and there's many RFCs presenting it in different ways. So I just took that as a baseline format. Yeah, I added some explicit cancellation of ongoing subscriptions. That was also another request added during Brisbane that I couldn't address before. And then I also got editorial or some requests and editorial changes, I think from Ari, and basically I incorporated in the draft. And yeah, and then again, more clarifications that were requested, and that's it. So basically, from the point of view of the authors, I would say the document is ready, it's mature, and it has gone through even several reviews. I know, Francesca, you have been reviewing as well during the weekend. So then, next slide, I would like to propose a working group last call for this document. That's the next slide. Yep, and that's it. Any comments or thoughts? I know that in parallel you have the ACE track for the PubSub for the security aspects, and that one is mature as well, right?
Francesca Palombini, as individual. Yeah, I have started, almost done with my review of the core PubSub, and I think I would say go for working group last call. I will send my review at the same time as working group last call. So far, it seems all good. It's nothing. I haven't found anything blocking. So in favor of working group last call and getting more eyes on it and then moving it forward.
I forgot to mention also during the hackathon, I spoke with Esco and kind of lured him into shepherding the document if he could be so kind. Thank you.
Thanks, Esco.
So I profit being here to come to the mic and say yes, please. For the last call. Let's do it.
Thank you.
Yeah, Marco here, also speaking as an individual, also because I'm a contributor to the document. I think it's largely ready. I'll give it another pass as an internal review. Consider this a prior working group call comment on slide 3, I think. If we can somehow see it, at least on Miteco. Yeah. This is related to a comment we got on the similar architecture of the ACE document, Oscar Gemadmin from Karsten, I think. There's one particular handler in the configuration resource that is really supposed to behave as a post, not as a put. So what we have for one particular case there as put should really be a post, but that's something that can be easily changed. The semantics is already the semantics of a post. It's really about using the right method.
Right. Yep. Thanks. I'll check that. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and next would be Esco for Group Combis.
Yes.
Or can I see them somewhere?
Yeah, let me, what do I have to transfer log? You have
Oh
to
yeah,
transfer
that will be great. Yeah, even better.
That's cool.
Yeah,
sure.
This works.
So you just gave your phone control. Sorry.
Oh yeah, let's see there. Slides.
It's easy if I give control to you, actually, right?
Yeah.
No, you control.
Okay, so now it has control. Sorry about that.
Okay, thanks. I'm Esco, so I will give a brief update about GroupCom draft. So we have made a new version as well. I have a clicker here, so I should be able to click, right? It works. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, a little bit of screen problems here. So yeah, Group Combis is basically a draft that has been running for a long time. So it's going to be the successor of previous experimental RFC about group communication. So the idea is to make a new document that is the standard for people implementing group communication, a kind of reference, all the things they should think about. And it also covers newer co-op features that were added in the meantime in the last couple of years. So I've told this a few times before. So we had Observe, Blockwise, OSCORE security, and now also a new thing that has been made more prominent in the last release is the no response option. So that can be used as well in co-op request for group communication. Okay, then just discuss the main updates since version 10. I think that was the last one we presented at an IETF meeting. And in the meantime, we had these updates all based on the review comment that Christian made. So very good, thanks. It was already way past working group last call, but they're useful anyway. So I think he made a very thorough look through the document and flagged any instances that he thought should be changed. So this led to some things. So new content, clarifications, and also some simplifications of content. And so, but on the new things, well, we now support the use of the block 2 option for get and fetch group requests. So that has been added. It's a relatively simple addition, but we found, well, there's actually no reason to prevent that. So it just works in certain cases. So we explain when it works and how to do it. Also, there are some simplifications made in a topic that was about identical e-tags from multiple servers. So yeah, simplified a bit how to handle that. And there's 2 new appendices being added. So that contains some content that was moved out of the main document. So these are issues and limitations with forward and reverse proxies. So we decided like it's maybe not good to spend lots of text describing what does not work, but rather focus on what does work. But we still had those issues. We still want to document them, so that got moved to the appendices. So then on to the clarification section. So that's a lot of editorial clarifications. And also clarified that the no response option is something we consider as a normative reference. So even though the document is informational, it's kind of also gets used in a normative way. So we decided to go along with that. So we have screen backup working, so that's very good. Yeah, and what about the simplifications? Well, there was a section on application group naming, and it listed lots and lots of methods how you could do it, even methods that nobody has ever tried, I think. And so now the focus is more on recommended methods. So we just say, this is how to do it, and don't try to be exhaustive, listing all possible methods. So it's a nice, streamlining of the document, I think. So what are the next steps? We're still maybe waiting for the working group and perhaps Christian to confirm that these changes are good because they were not just editorial, but pretty extensive. I think lots of moves around of content and removals. And we already had the working group last call, so I'm not sure if a second one or how many did we have? If a next one is needed on this, because these changes are now substantial. We still, I think, want to wait for the confirmation from Karsten, actually, that his comments were addressed. So far I haven't heard, but maybe you can just say, okay, and then we move along with that. But I still want to give you the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, we probably can parallelize this by doing a working group last call, and I send my confirmation as answer to the working group last call.
Yeah, that would be great. So I think it makes sense to do another one because of the substantial changes. Yeah, so, and if anyone knows about new co-op features that we still haven't considered, then it should also be flagged, I think, because maybe it's relevant for the group communication use case. And just to say, there's also a document on basically group communication via proxy, and that's coming up later today in this session. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Esko. Alex has a question, I think, or comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Alexander Pelf, I have a question that is, so first of all, I think that, we need to ship the document, so I don't want to delay it in anything. It's a more open question. So at the SHIC working group, we are, we're using CoreConf as a way to manage the SHIC devices, the SHIC endpoints, let's say. And we are looking in, of course, group communications. So like for multicast communications. And the point is a lot of it's not always going to be IP below. Sometimes it's going to be non-IP. Sometimes, you can have like a SHIC instance that's on a different layer. So how would you treat that? How should we treat that? Like, should we try to do a BIS of your document? Or, I don't want to in my head, the natural way would be to use a co-op group communications and use CoreConf on top of that, right?
So basically over non-IP transport you are
in some way
considering, because here I think this actually focuses on multicast UDP as the transport for co-op group communication. So I think it's kind of delineated and on purpose focused on that. So
Okay, so you think that we should be
so that's
working on a completely separate draft, or trying
Yeah,
to do
that-
this on this one? I don't know. Like I'm
could be
I'm-
both actually, but it's yeah, at least not in scope of the current document. It seems like.
Okay, thank you.
Just commenting on that, if we're using co-op multicast over something that is not co-op over UDP, we should start describing that transport, because I'm not aware of any work that is doing that so far.
Okay, yeah, so just to give you an example, so LoRaWAN, for example, there is a multicast, and there is SHIC over this, right? So it's described, and it's even IPv6. Like basically, it's we did a work where we had like IPv6 multicast mapped to LoRaWAN multicast with the use of SHIC, right? But if we want to do something on the SHIC layer to do the management, like we can probably, I mean, we can go through the, okay, well, it's IPv6, so we do the management on through that. But in some cases, maybe we want to do it as I mean, here I saw that you had like a section about a group communication over 6LoWPAN, right? So should we have the same thing like group communication over SHIC? I don't know.
Yeah, okay. So I think 6LoWPAN, yeah, it's included because it's maybe a specific case where we want to make some remarks about, but it's still IPv6 and UDP as a transport. So that's indeed in scope. If so, we could do that as well, I think.
Okay,
Yeah,
because
if there's something specific to say about that case, and
yeah, because she could be on that layer. Okay, it could be on that layer, right? So I mean, there. Okay, a lot of questions, but I just wanted to, because we had a little bit of time, I wanted to get your feeling of, you know, how should we proceed. But I mean, I don't want to include anything in the document because it seems so, quite extensive already, right? So probably it's better to ship it and see later on adding new stuff if there is something to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Christian, you're still in the queue. You want to say something more? Okay. Thank you all. Hello, everyone. Hope this works. This is an update on this working group document, also edited by me and Esko. And yeah, it takes over from where the previously presented document stops on the particular use of proxies for co-op group communication. And as a recap, in fact, the scope is mostly focused on a dialogue that an origin client can have with a proxy deployed in between the client and a group of servers in order to support group communication with those. And still the main intent is for the client to instruct the proxy about handling multiple responses from different servers for the same group request that has been forwarded, for how long to do that, and to forward back the individual responses from the servers back to the client, adding some more information with that forwarding back so that the client can also distinguish the different responses from one another and where they are originating from. In the process, we're also updating part of co-op RFC 7252 as to the caching and validation of responses if cached at the proxy in this particular setup. It's important to say that the proxy has to be fully aware of what exactly it is doing, and it has to be able to identify and authorize a client that is asking to forward a request to a group to avoid flooding the US, blah, blah, blah. And that has some additional requirements on security that is explicitly touched on. And yeah, it addresses the issues on this particular topic that started in group combis, and eventually, as Esko mentioned, were even moved as an appendix just to not distract the reader from the document body. Yeah, and to give really practically the gist of the protocol, the client wants to send a request to a group of servers. So it practically sends a unicast request to the proxy, asking it to forward it to the group of servers by means that we already have today. But in addition to that, we have two new co-op options. One is multicast timeout included in the request from the client, indicating for how long the proxy is supposed to do this and forward back responses to that request, after which it should just stop. That's it. And it's possible also to indicate a multicast timeout 0 to say, well, forward this, but I don't care about responses. The responses that the proxy forwards back to the client instead include a second new option that the proxy includes. It's called now reply from. It changed name twice now. It used to be response forwarding, then reply to. Now we are on reply from. It may change again. We have an issue for that, but now we are at reply from. It's hard to describe in a few words what exactly it says, but if I have to say something, it's addressing information that pertains to the origin server that produced that response. And in almost all the cases, it's really the address of the server that generated the response. You may have something slightly different if the proxy is precisely a reverse proxy hiding also the individual servers. But yeah, in general, it's addressing information related to the originator, so that if the client sends a new follow-up request, based on that information, that request will reach the server that originated the response. This can work without security, of course, but practically it's recommended, like from GroupConBIS already, to use security end-to-end between the client and the servers, and you can do that with GroupoScore that in itself works seamlessly in the presence of proxies. But we said the proxy has to identify and authorize the client in question because before forwarding, so you need an additional secure association between the client and the proxy. That could have always worked with TLS or DTLS, whatever. It's a PT, considering that we may have GroupoScore end-to-end between client and servers, and that's why we have enabled the use of OSCORE between client and proxy in a separate document with this setup as a use case for that. Now there should be a summary of updates. If I can, yes. Yeah, other than obvious clarification and minor editorial fixes, we've renamed, and that option, as I mentioned before, used to be an issue. And I realized that in the security considerations about adoption that we are supposed to provide, since it's class U for OSCORE, we weren't really discussing the importance of ensuring also confidentiality for that option. So it was pretty straightforward, still was missing. And now it's there. And on the other option, instead, yeah, it's supposed to have a format unsigned integer, of course, and it can take value 0, but there was some sort of confusing text on having the option empty instead, which is not its verbatim format, but just a practical result of the recommended encoding to have the option practically empty on the wire. So hopefully it's clearer now. We thought of reusing this comment that Christian gave on GroupConBIS on having the no response option RFC as a normative reference that should really become a common practice by now, I think. And we were already using that paired with the possible indication of multicast timeout with value 0. So this is mostly for the sake of the reference in itself. And also aligned with comments from Christian on GroupConBIS, we have some text here on the client side for the handling of multiple responses from the different servers. Like in GroupConBIS, we have generalized that text here too to say, well, yeah, it's expected that the application takes the final decision as expected to have more information and context to better judge, but it's really implementation specific where the decision is taken and based on what. We have also some interesting examples in appendix with different variations of this setup with forward or reverse proxies, and we noted some inconsistencies, especially in the addresses written there and the value of the URI host option. Now they are fixed. On the error handling, we were not covering some cases. One is in case, well, the proxy fails in identifying and authorizing the client. Now we are telling exactly what should happen in that case. Of course, other than not forwarding the request to the servers, there has to be an error response back, and 401 feels appropriate. And the other case that we were not covering is if one of the proxy in the chain in general doesn't find the value specified in multicast timeout suitable, well, it should stop and reply back with an error. We were not covering the case where that error eventually reaches the origin client that, well, may decide to start over with a new request with a more appropriate value. While for the proxy instead, it's more general. It can decide to try again with a higher timeout value to the next proxy to the origin server, or just forward the response, the error response back towards the origin client. This was another main comment from Christian that used to be an issue. We have HTTP header fields corresponding to the two new co-op options, and they were structured, or at least the comment was focusing on one of those being structured. Yes. So the suggestion was to redefine its semantics to be built on what is now RFC 9651 HTTP structure field values. So we did that. We defined the semantics according to that. It was most of the time spent to study the details of the RFC than to make the actual change in this document, honestly. And then, well, the same comment actually applied also to the other groupie tag header field corresponding to the groupie tag header option, and we made the same exercise there too. There's a bit of asymmetry here in the use of this header, like of the option between requests and responses, but that should be covered. And in terms of practical behavior, this HTTP to COAP proxy here would perform the actual validation process like a COAP to COAP proxy does. But in case of successful validation, what would be a 203 response for the COAP to COAP proxy becomes here the 304 not modified response for the HTTP to COAP proxy.
Yeah, that's broken now.
Is it?
Yes.
Cool.
I rebooted the laptop that crashed. And that, of course, had stolen the Meet Echo session. But it's still rebooting, so I cannot stop.
Yeah, I think we're just missing the next steps.
Yeah.
I don't remember them by heart. There's a bunch, mostly based on Christian comments. Again, I think it's about the client requesting for an early stopping of an ongoing request forwarding, and thanks. Thank you very much. Enabling an HTTP to COAP proxy to forward back to the client, not a single HTTP response, including all the squashed COAP responses into that at once, but actually in a stream-like fashion, taking advantage of the transfer coding chunked that Christian suggested, and we have to explore a bit more. I would still like to consider enabling the possibility of validation also in the only leg that we are missing between proxy and server. That would mean making the tag option also out there, which is not the case now. But that implies the existence of cacheability of responses at the proxy in the first place. So maybe that detail is something to better define in the other document about cacheable OSCORP. It's still an open point. And Christian recently opened the issue 3 more on the naming of that option that may change again. Looks like that option is defining something similar to other things that are desired in other particular setups that probably they are worth their own options, and we may end up with this cluster of similar options. And there's probably nothing left to do on the option in this document other than probably renaming it again to be better aligned with the to-be cluster. We'll see. Until then, please review. Comments are welcome. Thank you. See no comments. Not sure about the queue. Guess none. Yeah. You can deliver like we do for co-op to co-op, actually, in a stream-like fashion. That would be great. Thank you. Okay, next is Raquel with kudos. Sure thing.
Okay.
We have the yes. Just 1 second to load them up.
Right. Yes. Hello, everyone. I will present some updates to this key update for OSCORE draft, which we abbreviate as kudos. So just to recap what this is about, it's a method to perform key update for OSCORE in a lightweight manner. Then result is that you renew your master secret and master salt, which will mean that you get fresh sender and recipient keys, which are the keys practically used for message encryption and decryption. It doesn't change this ID context parameter that OSCORE defines, and it can also achieve perfect forward secrecy. And there's some benefit in some context in not changing this ID context, which is described in the draft. It's agnostic of the original key establishment method. You can establish your keys hard-coded or with ad hoc, with whatever means. You can still use kudos to update your keys. Loosely inspired by the OSCOR Appendix B2, which describes a method for key update for OSCOR also. This draft was actually 3 parts originally. Second part was about key usage limits for OSCOR, and this has been split out into a new draft. And there was another part about a procedure for updating the OSCOR sender and recipient ID for privacy reasons. And I will briefly mention these also in my presentation. So an overview of the message flow. Essentially, it comes down to an exchange of nonces placed in new fields in the unextended version of the OSCOR option. And then you use those nonces together with the information about the length of the nonces and some flag bits, together with your old key material. You use that as input, and you practically use an HKDF to derive a new master secret. So to go over the updates we did, now we're up to version 9, and the first update we did was we have this table, 2 tables actually, in the draft showing message overhead, comparing, let's say, a normal OSCOR response or request with the case when kudos is used. And we did some major updates to this section, both in terms of recalculating the numbers, because we realized we had missed, for instance, the possible presence of the 1 byte option length extended field when the option goes over a certain length, like when you have a long nonce. And we also much more clearly stated like our assumptions when doing this calculation. Like, for instance, we assume that the nonces are the same size for both pairs. We assume there's a 1 byte partial IV, requests have a 1 byte KID, and responses have no KID. And these are, I mean, reasonable assumptions that make sense for OSCOR. It's just you could theoretically have different values. We also, based on some, actually a lot of these points are based on a review that Christian gave. We considered adding a new parameter to signal kudos support when using the ACE OSCOR profile. That could have been nice to already have signaling built into that profile. However, we concluded that actually kudos will not be compatible with OSCOR ACE profile because we're changing the master secret, and that functions as the proof of possession key in the access token. And due to that, it's not something you can combine, but we will add text covering usage of the ad hoc OSCOR ACE profile, where we actually don't have this problem, because there the pop key is not a symmetric key. So we also did another, let's call it optimization, or a means for a certain class of very constrained devices to still use kudos. And this was from Christian's review also, and he brought up you may have very constrained devices that don't actually have the capacity to store to persistent memory across a reboot. And in this case, we allowed them to use kudos in the forward secrecy mode. So practically, the way this would work is that you have some device, they don't have any key material pre-installed, but they use something like the ad hoc ACE profile to establish key material with another pair. And after that, we consider this key material as the latest key material, and essentially the device can then use kudos as normal in the forward secrecy mode because it never has any bootstrap material. It just always keeps its latest material in RAM. And of course, if this device reboots, because the type of device it is, it will lose all key material, and it will need to like redo this in-band procedure, like actually rerun the ad hoc ACE OSCOR profile. But to summarize this, it's really about allowing non-capable devices, very constrained devices without flash memory or such, to still use kudos, which they were locked out from in the past. We did some clarifications on key confirmation and deletion of old security contexts, clarity of language when it comes to the relation between contexts, because you have your old context that uses input together with a nonce to generate your new context. but you also have this intermediate context. So we are much more clear now in how these are related to each other and how these are actually like chained in a sense. One is a parent of another. We clarified when key confirmation is reached, when you run kudos twice in succession before actually getting explicit key confirmation for your first kudos execution. But you will still achieve key confirmation, again, because of this chaining and because of the relationship between the contexts, in the sense that you will achieve key confirmation of your new context when you successfully verify the first kudos message of the second execution, because the previous context was used to derive your CTX1 that you're using now. And again, it comes down to this chain of contexts, because all the key material, they build on top of each other, basically. We also warned about not running kudos with sufficient margin. So for instance, you may need to do a key update if you're close to running out of sender sequence numbers in OSCORE, or if the security context is close to expiration. And if you don't initiate your key update well ahead of such events, you may actually need to abort ongoing message exchanges because you are forced to run kudos. And the way kudos is stated now, for security reasons, you need to abort any ongoing message exchange. So this can be very important to be aware of, like if you have very long-lived exchanges, like co-op in space or something like that, that you should definitely do it well ahead of time to not have to abort an ongoing exchange. So practically you sent the request and now you want to run kudos, but you haven't gotten the response yet. Well, now you need to stop listening for that response, basically. So we also clarified, we have this core.kudos resource type, which we defined in the draft. And this is a type of resource that you can use as a target. If you're a client and you wish to run kudos with other peer, you send your request to a resource of this type. And we clarify that why did we define this? It's because a resource of this type does not pertain to any real application, and a client can be sure that no application level actions will be triggered by this request coming in. And so what practically this allows is clients can run kudos being fully certain that no application layer processing will happen on the server. Because if the client was targeting a resource that was a normal type of resource or a resource that existed, the client could inadvertently cause some action on the server that doesn't want to happen. We also did some editorial improvements and clarifications, and some content restructuring where we actually had two separate sections describing why you should avoid in-transit requests during a kudos execution. We were describing it both for the forward flow where the client initiates and the reverse flow when the server initiates. But we decided to just merge these sections instead, since they were kind of duplicating text a lot. We also clarified that we have a section 4 that really describes the main functionality of kudos, but consider that you're running kudos in the forward secrecy mode. And section 5 serves then as a delta and focuses on when you want to use the mode without forward secrecy. And just to clarify, the reason we have these two modes is because again, to help support very constrained devices that are unable to store and remember their latest keying material, and so they have to revert to some kind of set of bootstrap keying material. But of course, ideally, and we recommend you should use kudos in FS mode if you are capable as a device to do it. Yeah, and one more point we did is we enabled servers that function as pure co-op servers to use kudos in the reverse message flow. So I just consider this scenario. You have a pair that is only capable as acting as a co-op server, meaning it cannot be a co-op client, it cannot send requests. In the case such a pair reaches the key usage limits for its recipient key, it will be unable to decrypt incoming requests from the client. And you see here in the top right corner, this is the reverse flow of kudos, where the client is not initiating kudos, it's sending a normal OSCORE protected request to the server. The problem then becomes that the server cannot decrypt this request one, and due to that, it cannot send a response, and that response would be the trigger to initiate kudos. Because it may be the case the client is completely fine. It doesn't want to run kudos. It doesn't even know the server has a problem. It's the server that needs to use kudos to update its keys because the server has an issue with key usage limit or expiration of its context. And the way we solve this is basically we allow the server to send kudos response 1 to initiate the kudos in reverse flow without actually decrypting this request 1. And the way we enable this is by defining an optional modified steps for processing of OSCORE, incoming OSCORE requests. And this is something a server may do. And practically, this means that when the server gets this request 1 in the figure, it retrieves recipient context. It sees that it is invalid, meaning that, for instance, the limits have been reached for use of the recipient key. Well, in such case, the server can simply respond now with a 401 unauthorized error message. But the key property here is that if this error message is a kudos response 1, the server can still protect it with the score security context CTX1 derived from its security context CTX0. And just to clarify here that the problem here is that the server's recipient key is not valid to use, but the server's sender key is still valid to use. That's, of course, a requirement. And just to briefly cover the key usage limits and the ID update document. The ID update, just to recap, method for updating OSCORE recipient and sender IDs can be done for privacy reasons, can be embedded in a kudos execution or run standalone, initiated by either the client or the server. Next steps for this, we want to have more examples, including failure cases where the procedure does not work, just to make sure that both pairs end up in a state that they can continue from. We also want to structure the text a bit to split long sections in the interest of readability. Key usage limits. This is about OSCORE-specific safe limits for using your sender and recipient key in terms of safe number of encryptions using your sender key and safe number of failed decryptions using a recipient key. And the next step here is like this document, the core OSCORE key limits, it's strongly based on a document in CFRG covering key usage limit for AD algorithms in general. So we're really following along with what's happening with that. I mean, they have updated it from time to time, but no major content-related changes. Summary next steps. Well, we still have a number of, well, actually 3 open points from Christian's review. So thank you to Christian for review. You can also find the actual text of the review in this mail. The 3 specific open points we have not processed yet and that require some more discussion is a possibility of generalizations relying on the Borman core responses, the non-traditional responses draft, and if some of those building blocks can be brought into kudos and used. And there was also a proposal for a different mechanism for preserving observations and a possible simplification of the forward and reverse flow concepts, which can also help avoid deadlocks in a more simple manner. And we also have now 2 implementations of kudos, one in Java, supporting both the forward and reverse message flows. And we have another implementation in C for the Contiki NG operating system for constrained devices that is now supporting the forward message flow, both acting as a server and client. And these have been tested towards each other and found to be compatible and working. So yeah, that concludes my presentation, and any comments or reviews or questions are very welcome.
Thanks. Christian in the queue.
Yeah, Christian here. Thanks for addressing all this. I think that the case for the pure server can even be generalized a bit more, because when the recipient key is good and the server key, sender key is bad,
yes.
That can even be a successful response. But I'll come back to that in the next presentation. So just thanks for pointing this out. I think we can generalize a bit more here.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, here we did it unauthorized error message, I guess, because we thought like the context is invalid and some that should trigger an error. But yes, let's discuss further. Thanks for the comment.
Thank you. Any more quick comments or questions? Hearing none. Thanks also for good timing.
Thank you.
Next is Carles. And we are 5 minutes ahead, so no stress.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Carlos Gomez, and I'm going to present the last update of the draft entitled Co-op over Bundle Protocol. My co-author is Ana Calveras, we're both from UPC. So on the status of the draft, the two previous versions of it were presented in the last two IETF meetings in both the core and the DTN working group sessions. For those of you who might not be familiar with it, the DTN working group is the one that specifies the bundle protocol and its related ecosystem. And today I'm presenting revision 02 of this document, where the main update has been an attempt to provide optional support of co-op message aggregation, which involves using or introducing a somewhat new payload length option. Also, the draft incorporates feedback from the last meeting, and there are also updates after Marco's review on 01. Thanks a lot, by the way, Marco and everyone who has been providing lots of useful comments. So this is what has changed in the table of contents. There are basically two new subsections. Both are related with this defining of co-op message aggregation. And the first one is a subsection to the 3 entitled New Terms, which is part of the terminology section. So we have attempted to introduce a couple of terms that may be helpful or have been already helpful to support the description of this aggregation functionality, which would be as follows for the terms. The first one would be a single message, which would be a co-op message which is carried as the payload of the underlying layer PDU, which specifically in the case of co-op over BP, a single message is carried as the block type specific data field of the bundle payload block of the encapsulating bundle, which basically means that, in other words, a single message is the payload of the bundle. And an aggregate message would be a concatenation of single messages that carry the payload length option. So in co-op over BP, an aggregate message would be the payload of the encapsulating bundle. Then subsection 4.3 introduces the payload length option. This is not a new idea. Something like this has been around in the working group for a very long time. Some related ideas were already drafted by Karsten in his miscellaneous draft a long time ago. Also, there was even an individual draft which started to work on this. So yeah, here we have included this in this document. So the payload length option would be defined as, well, indicating the size of the payload of a co-op message, starting from the first bit of the options field. And it would be defined as follows. It would be critical, safe to forward, part of the cache key, and not repeatable. The length would be between 1 and 5 bytes, and there would be no default value. And for the format, we need to make a correction. So yeah, in 03, we'll just state that the format is a non-signed integer with a size indicated by the option length field. So please ignore the second half, the lower part of the slide. Yeah, so section 5 is entitled Encapsulating Bundle. In this revision, we have added that if an aggregate message comprises at least one con message and one non-message, the lifetime field of the encapsulating bundle is set to the maximum of exchange lifetime and non-lifetime. By the way, usually the maximum of exchange lifetime and non-lifetime should equal exchange lifetime. However, perhaps we've been a bit conservative on how we write this, maybe just in case someone sets the parameters in a way a bit different from the expectation. And also we may want to refine this further in a future update to capture the additional aggregation delay that there might be since a single co-op message is generated until the bundle carrying an aggregate message that includes the single message is actually transmitted. Then there have been other updates of different nature. So in section 4.1, which describes the messaging model, we have just added a brief mention, mostly a reminder, of the no response option, which may be useful in some scenarios in order to reduce message overhead, as in fact, some of the scenarios or many of the scenarios where the bundle protocol is used are quite challenged. Then in section 7 on observe, we had some text that determining whether a notification was sent by the server later than another notification. In the previous version, we said should be performed based on the creation timestamps of the encapsulating bundles. Now, after some feedback in the last meeting in the DTN working group, we have increased the requirement level to must to somehow simplify the operation. And also this would mean that the creation timestamp of a bundle would, well, now needs to be available at the application layer. And in section 9, which defines the URI scheme for CoAP over BP, well, there are two kinds of endpoint identifiers in the bundle protocol. Some are based, well, one is based on the DTN scheme. The other one is based on the IPN scheme, which you will see an example later. So for this one, the authority component of the URI for CoAP over BP would be constructed as follows. It would be service number dot node number dot IPN dot ARPA. Here the change compared with the previous version of the draft is that we have reversed the order of node number and service number. Well, thanks to Karsten for the comment. And as a result, for example, the URI of the discovery resource for an endpoint ID IPN colon 81.2 would be coap://2.81.ipn.arpa/well-known/core. So actually that's it for this presentation. Not sure if there may be comments or questions.
I think Alex has a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I always forget to raise the hand before. So thank you, very, very interesting work. Just a short question. So I skimmed through the draft. I saw that you're talking about timers, that, you know, like you can get delays and, you know, things can get wild there. Do you see any particular adjustments to the state machines or something else that needs to be specified in that document in the future, probably?
You mean modifying, say, like not only setting parameters, but also modifying the actual operation of the protocol, like...
Yes, I mean, it's an open question, right?
Yeah, let's see. So ideally, the best thing would be like try to see if it can work by just setting parameters, let's say, or maybe define options, but not modifying like the core operation of the protocols involved. So far, it might appear that we haven't seen yet a need for actually modifying the state machine. There was also some sort of open question about congestion control that for a while has been like on the side. I don't know how that will be handled. Also, we received some feedback that maybe, because you mentioned the parameters, most of them are for con messages. However, there was also some suggestions from the DTN working group that maybe we want to rely a bit more on the underlying layers below the bundle protocol to handle things kind of congestion or flow control, something like that, and use non-messages in CoAP to somewhat simplify things and so on. Still, I understand that we may need or may want to have con messages and use them in some cases. So yeah, that complexity of the timers and so on will still be in place, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you.
Christian?
Just a quick remark. Just please be aware that like you can take the UDP state machine of CoAP or UDP in and then have those timers, but you don't have to. Like if it works for you and if it works for you without modifications, that's nice, but there don't have to be non and con messages. If the underlying transport has all the flexibility and things can be expressed there, great, do it. if it turns out you need explicit con on the top layer, also fine.
Yeah, thanks for the comment. Yeah, the point is, in this document, our scope is scope over BP, so we don't really know what will be below BP. So actual scenarios with missions and deployments are using actual solutions there, actual links and protocols below the bundle protocol. But yeah, so I guess that it's good to keep like all the options, and then maybe one can choose what is best for some specific scenario.
Yes, so just maybe one follow-up idea or suggestion or question, I don't know, is to have some kind of good best practices, for using a co-op over BP, right? If you want to say, okay, I want communication over to the moon, well, this is like, you need this kind of buffers or this kind of stuff, like just because, I mean, it's really great to have, okay, I'm running co-op to the moon, that's great, or to Mars or to somewhere else. But like you don't want to deploy and then well, it doesn't work exactly as it's supposed to.
Yeah, and realize of that after some days, maybe. Yeah. So yeah, definitely we are interested also on the research side of this work, and yeah, there was like very useful information provided, for instance, yesterday in the Deep Space Side meeting about RTTs and so on from actual missions. And yeah, I guess at some point we'll be able to actually simulate what would be the performance that we can get in actual scenarios.
Yeah, it just triggered me to think about them. Maybe you should first simulate the protocol before you send the node to Mars. But
definitely.
Makes sense. So if you have any type of simulator, I would be interested to hear from it at some point.
So yeah, not really at the moment, but we're starting like to build some. Our goal is to have some sort of test bed where we can kind of emulate things. So yeah, let's hope that well, we can bring something about that hopefully next month maybe, or next year. Let's see.
Yeah. And then I had another question basically about the scheme. So you have BP as transport, but so is it now correct? Latest insight to use co-op as the scheme, so no plus something, right? Okay, that's good. And if that's the case, then maybe it's also good to think about an example where security is used. So maybe from this URI's co-op, I can't really see if it's actually secured or not. It's
okay.
It could be OSCORE, but maybe it's good to have some security specific examples, either OSCORE or DTLS or whatever is practical. DTLS might not be very practical because it has this handshake thing which would fail if you do it to Jupiter. So
yeah, so
it's something to consider.
So security in this document is something that will need a lot of work actually, and we are open to help if anyone would like to contribute, because actually it's possible to use security at the co-op level, but also there is BP security, there's BPSec. So yeah, we need to see exactly how, whether we use security from BP, from at the co-op level, maybe using a score, maybe both. Let's see. So that's an important field. And anyway, yeah, we will add examples and so on. Yeah.
Yep. Maybe, I don't know, it's more like a comment. During the hackathon, Marek Serafin was in it. He showed a really nice extensions for Node-RED, because you mentioned emulation, not simulation, emulation.
Yeah.
So these extensions will be published soon, and I think you should check them out, because maybe that's a nice, again, a nice environment to test these things as well.
Okay.
Because he has also ad hoc, he has also other, I don't know what's the term in Node-RED, all of these blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be a nice way to start testing things as well.
Thank you.
Please be quick, just to be sure to have time for the last presentation.
Okay, so there's the deep space buff, and it's like putting IP over communication. So do you think there is like a convergence between, because I think you have a draft there as well.
Yeah.
A convergence between the two transports, or how do you see?
Yeah. So yeah, this time I didn't present the co-op in space draft. Some of the functionality there applies quite similar to the one that is here. There are other things, of course, because the underlying transports are different. Yeah, so it's just that some part of, like, there are those two documents, some of that is the same, but then there are some separate things due to the different transports. Yeah.
Okay, we have exactly 5 minutes left for Christian.
Thank you, Candace.
That's about what I plan to use. So stateless OS core. Why would you do this? This all started because Tammy Dietrich had a presentation in the Riot Summit on what NTP can do, and I thought, well, yeah, we can do that as an OS core. Wait, we can't. So I was just playing around a bit. So what is that thing that NTS can do that we can't do? That is, an NTS server can have an arbitrary number of clients, have a secure state with each of them without its own memory space growing linearly with the number of clients. That we can't have in OS core right now. But I think that OS core has all the building blocks to do it, because as long as the server doesn't need to store the key per peer, it could do something similar, and it could, for example, have an internal secret and store like everything that it needs to come from that internal global secret to a per peer secret inside the KID, and that would be then something that the client sends along anyway, and then the server can rederive the key, for example, by using a hash of the recipient key and that internal key all the time, with some caveats, of course. The caveats being that this would only ever work for stateless operations, for essentially for things that work in a zero round trip time context, which is like that zero round trip time that came up in the issue 40 that we've mentioned like 3 or 4 times now. One downside of this is that you cannot immediately do this with a key that is coming from someone. So in ad hoc, we establish the key mutually without ever sending it on the wire. In ACE OS core profile, we have the AS send the key all to everyone. So we have to redistribute the key again. And there's a caveat on the limitations on how often you can use the global key, because kind of you can't store a sequence number per peer. You have to use the global sequence number. But I think that kudos, as Rikard has already presented today, especially with that server-only mode, can help you. Yep. I wrote it down basically because I thought it was good to consider whether we can do this in the first place. Whether we should, I don't know. I don't have a use case where I have more than 500 million devices on with a server, because that's roughly the number that you could store in RAM on a reasonable server right now. So maybe that's a Dasher one-trick pony. If you have any applications for like using really many clients, or being robust to many people, or maybe even a DOS attack, trying to register new clients in order to evict the old ones, well, won't happen here. Talk to me if you want to do this. I think it can be made to work. It's an early draft, but I think it should be sound. Yeah.
I haven't checked it. I haven't seen the draft. I don't know much context, but when you say many devices, those context dots came to mind. They use co-op for signaling as well. So it might be, there could be something.
Thing is, you can do, like, I describe this as do it with safe requests, get and fetch. In theory, if your application makes sure that what you do is idempotent whenever, ever, any time again this gets replayed, that's fine too. So yeah, might be something worth looking into.
Yes, thank you. So maybe just like from the top of my head, in interstellar communication, maybe you don't have too many devices, but maybe you'll have devices that are living long time. So you want to have, this thing of, having maybe one key and being able to use it for many days, something like that, or years. I don't know.
I think that if you have just a few devices, you could just store your per device keys for a long time and then get all the properties of OSCore. But maybe I'm just kind of missing something. So let's
And,
clouds out
and
there.
another use case I was thinking about is how about if you have like IoT satellite communication that use mostly uplink communications? So maybe there are no downlinks. So you set up the devices and they are using, you know, like some of the new constellations that are uplink only.
I think then you might again run into the limitations of what you can do with this, because this can only do fetch and get, and a no response fetch and a no response get are like. But again, maybe maybe application level idempotency helps here, so that might be something to explore further. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more very quick comment or question? Anyone? Then we are done for the day. Thanks a lot to the presenters, everyone, for your work and participation. See you at the interim meetings and enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you all.